From the beginning of humanity, people have always been afraid of the dark, of things lurking in the shadows. Throughout time, they continue to report seeing beings watching them from the darkness. For the past several years, interest in shadow people has increased as evidenced through increased search traffic, more shared stories on social media, and even trending posts on creepypasta forums and sites like Reddit. But what exactly are shadow people? And do they even really exist? No one can agree as to what they are, from ghosts to aliens, from malicious entities to even shadowy projections of our own inner darkness. What everyone can agree upon is that seeing one is a terrifying experience. Shadow people tend to appear at the moment of death, often through the peripheral vision of the person dying. They sometimes take on the shape and form of a person, complete with glowing eyes. People viewing them can experience a type of sleep paralysis. Shadow people have been known to visit the sick or dying, like scavenger creatures waiting to eat their souls. Whatever the case, because the reports of shadow people have been so numerous and so often, certainly something about them is true, that they are likely quite real and should be studied in more detail. On tonight's episode of Nightmare Project, we share a tale of an elderly veteran who is being terrorized by shadow people after he has an accident in his home. Do you believe in shadow people? Share your experiences in our comment section below. And now, enjoy tonight's episode, The Scavengers.
Leave me be. Just leave me alone,
I stated simply. I didn't really mean it, of course, and she certainly didn't deserve it, but I was just so angry at pretty much, well, everything now it seems. Since my wife passed, I pushed everyone away. I didn't need anyone feeling sorry for me. I just wanted to live out the rest of my life, my way, and alone. Then 6 months ago, I had a mild stroke, and that put a damper on my planned hermit lifestyle. The stroke brought an impairment to the left side of my body, so the people at the VA hospital had to set me up with a visiting nurse. The 3 visits a week seemed to be 3 times too many. I hated her. Well, not her, just the intrusions, the wheelchair, walker, the power lift recliner, and everything else that she thrust upon me. It all led to my utter bitterness. I will admit that after the stroke, I became a real asshole. I made sure that as long as I was miserable, then everyone around me would be too. The next thing you know, the pandemic hit. All the big cities shut down and mine along with it. I never thought much about it until I got a call from my nurse. She told me that the mandated quarantine meant that she would have to do phone check-ins instead of in person. I've got to say, I liked what I was hearing. I thought this new quarantine life suited me just fine. I'll call you again in a few days, she replied in her same as always cheerful tone.
whatever.
We both paused, so I hung up the line. My rude neighbor started blaring his music again. I could almost feel the bass bumping through the thin walls of our duplex.
Turn it down, dang it!
I yelled, banging on the wall to get him to stop. I spun around quickly to head back to my living room in my comfortable chair for a little Jeopardy on the television. My weak left leg gave out and I fell hard. After the stroke, I should have been more careful. On the way down, I struck my head on the side table. I laid there for more than a moment and mentally assessed my condition. Reaching up with my good arm to my head, I could feel that I had a gash on my head. Not too bad, but it was definitely bleeding more than just a little bit. My head started throbbing harder. Panic swept in as I tried to get up and failed. Despite my situation, I found myself chuckling because I had recently watched a commercial where a woman had fallen and couldn't get up. How ironic. I knew I was in serious trouble. My stroke-weakened left side made it impossible for me to get up, and my head wound was making me dizzy. I propped myself up as much as I was able to, searching around the nearby area for anything that could help me. My walker was just out of reach. I tried dragging myself closer to the couch, but just couldn't. Suddenly, a long shadowy shape drifted across the room. I caught it suddenly from the corner of my eye. I was starting to freak out a bit. Then I thought I heard a voice.
Who's there? Is someone there?
I tentatively asked.
Show yourself.
I said in a more brave-sounding voice.
Give
The shadow moved again, closer this time, reaching out for me. I gasped and blacked out. When I opened my eyes again, my head was still spinning. I don't know how long I was out. I probably had a concussion. I told myself that if I could survive a year in Vietnam, I could get myself off this damn floor. I pushed with my good arm as hard as I could, trembling in pain. I failed and again heard a disembodied voice. It repeated. The streetlight was seeping in through the front window, filling the room with long shadows and pools of darkness. I could just barely see the blurred green glow from the microwave clock in the kitchen. The shadows seemed to move on their own, coalescing into the rough shape of a person, but with distorted proportions and intent. In the deeper shadows, I could see that there were more of them.
Leave me alone. Go away.
I yelled at the shadow people.
We will wait.
I could hear my neighbor playing his music again.
Help!
I shouted towards the wall behind me. No way he could have heard me over the booming music. I pounded my good fist on the floor in frustration. It had been hours. I needed to get up. Despite my better judgment, I tried to roll over again. I got about halfway there when the dizziness hit, and again I blacked out. It was not even the first time I had seen these shadow people. I recalled during an intense firefight in Nam, seeing shadow people milling around the battlefield. I saw shadow people in the MASH unit, where I received treatment on a wound sustained in battle, and in the hospital when my wife passed away suddenly. I had done some research on them and read that shadow people would come and claim the souls of the dying in some cultures and religions. I woke to the sound of screaming. I opened my eyes to dead silence. It seemed like the closer I get to death, the louder they are. I couldn't see them, but I could tell they were here in the room with me, waiting.
You can't have me! I won't stop fighting!
I said, sounding strong.
You don't have no strength.
The shape slowly circled around me, like hyenas on the savannah, biding their time, waiting for the injured animal to get even weaker.
You can't hold out. What do you want from me?
I yelled out at the nothingness.
To join us. Becoming.
I closed my eyelids tightly, hoping the darkness behind them would somehow hide me from the living blackness beyond. Doing this had reminded me of my childhood and the fear of the dark that came with it. All I needed now was a blanket to pull over my head. The next time I awoke, the apartment was lit by daylight. Rock music was pouring through the wall in the kitchen. Its beat was keeping pace with the pounding in my head. The growling in my stomach The sandpaper texture on my tongue worried me. I haven't eaten or drank anything in over 14 hours. After about 30 minutes or so, the music stopped. I remember muttering that it was about time. Knowing it was going to hurt, I took a deep breath and tried to call out. I was hoping my neighbor would hear. My dry throat wouldn't let much sound out. A couple of miserable hours later, I found myself staring at my walker. It was sitting about 4 feet away from my outstretched hand. If I could reach it, maybe I could get myself back up. When I tried to push my body forward with my one strong arm and leg, the strain put too much pressure on my head. I had to stop or else I would pass out again. Rock music and sunlight woke me from the dreamless sleep. I tried to calculate how long I have been lying here, but the music in my throbbing temples made it impossible to think. I looked over, and the walker was now laying over by the far wall, way out of reach. The shadow people had moved it. It wasn't a dream, what happened last night. It was a nightmare. After a bit, the music stopped. A moment later, I heard the neighbor pound on my kitchen wall, mocking me.
Help me, please.
I pleaded, but there was no way that he could hear my now feeble voice. I muttered out loud to myself.
Sorry, I can't play your stupid game today. I'm too busy dying here.
I could feel myself getting weaker and weaker. My thirst was immense, and I was finding it hard to stay awake. It was a struggle not to believe that here on this floor was where it was all going to end. The anger this time set in when I heard laughter. I just knew the appearance of the shadow people last night did not bode well for me. I demanded the intruders get out of my home. The laughing stopped. I laid there in silence for the next hour, trying not to fall asleep. I was afraid if I did, I might not wake back up. Soon enough, I lost that battle and drifted off. When I woke up to the sound of music playing, I smiled at knowing I was still alive. It was getting hard to focus on the microwave clock, but I could make out the time of 7:38 p.m. Looking around the room, I didn't see any signs of my unwanted guests. Maybe they went away, I thought, but I knew I wasn't going to be that lucky. I kept pinching my leg to keep me from falling asleep, but I again drifted off. When I opened my eyes this time, it was nearly 4 a.m. The apartment was very dark. My mouth was so dry that when I yawned, my lips split open, making me cry out in pain. Behind me, I again hear them laugh.
You're there, aren't you?
I asked simply. A long pause.
Yes.
It didn't surprise me. Looking around the room, I could make out the several shadow people lurking in the dark shadows, moving slowly from place to place, avoiding both the light and the direct gaze. I watched them for what seemed like hours. When I looked back over at the clock, the numbers were too blurry to make out.
Go away. Leave me be.
I pleaded to the shadow people.
We can't.
I started to cry then, but my dehydrated eyes would not give up any tears.
It's not my time to die yet.
I begged. As my consciousness started to slip away, I heard one whisper.
So.
When I awoke, I was afraid to open my eyes. Nothing hurt anymore, and I knew that wasn't good. I again could hear the music from next door, but couldn't focus on it. When I finally did open my eyes, the light was almost too much to handle. It was daytime again. My eyes couldn't focus. When my vision cleared, I was taken back. Standing around me were over a dozen shadow people, just as black as they looked in the darkness of night. Many thoughts and questions ran through my mind, but only one word came out of my mouth.
When?
A few seconds ticked by with no reply. I could hear the music next door stop again. We all just stared at one another, unmoving. The trance-like state I was in broke when my neighbor pounded on the kitchen wall and yelled out something. I was unable to grasp what he said. I wanted to call back with all my might, but I knew it was too late. I was done. The shadow people started to fidget about me, like they were when they were excited about something. Then one of the shadows uttered, It took a step towards me, reaching out. I felt the temperature drop to icy cold as its hand closed over my mouth. Suddenly, bright light blinded me, forcing my eyes to squeeze tightly shut. I could feel myself slipping into unconsciousness. I woke up a week later in the VA hospital. They told me my neighbor called the fire department to check on me after my lack of response to his loud music and his poundings on the shared wall. During her daily visits to the hospital room, my nurse kept reminding me of how close I came to dying. The shadow people invading my nightmares told me more often than that. After a few weeks of healing and rehab, I was finally allowed to go home. When I first got back to my apartment building, I went straight to my neighbor's door to thank him for what he did for me. I gave him a gift, some high-end noise-canceling headphones to listen to his music with. That put a big smile on his face, and a key to my apartment, which put a tearful smile on mine. At least 3 to 4 times a week, my neighbor will stop over for a long game of cards or some Jeopardy on the TV, and sometimes I even let him drive me to the rehab appointments. I no longer want to be left alone. He is like family now, and I feel blessed to have him in my life. We'll talk once in a while about those days on the floor, but I still don't mention the shadow people, not even to him, not to anyone. I haven't seen them since then, but I know someday they'll be back, as they will for us all.